Often known as the Roswell of Poland, this town is located on the north end of the country. Although not quite as famous as its US counterpart, there was a very similar event that took place here in 1959. Back then, in still Soviet-controlled Poland, several people would witness a light falling from the sky and then crashing into the icy waters next to the docks. Then, not long after this, a humanoid being would be found dragging its burned and battered body up the beach. In this video, let's take a deep dive into this largely unknown encounter and the following investigation. On January 21st, early in the morning, a bright spherical object around 15 feet wide would be seen falling from the sky over the Gdynia port. It soon passed over several port workers, ship crews, and even coast guards before crashing into one of the basins in the port. Several shocked witnesses would make their way over to the local authorities, with one man, Vladislav Konzitsky, telling them, "Me and my 5 colleagues were working in the cargo bay at that time. There was this sound, and it was rather like the sound created by the friction of metals. Whatever it was more than a meter long, more of a semicircular shape than round, first pink, then more and more reddening. The water gushed to a height of 1.5 meters. It would be 2 full days before anyone would come out to the port to perform any kind of interview. A couple of dock workers would tell a journalist that around 5 in the morning on January 21st they had actually seen a flying saucer hovering over the city, and this was just 1 hour before the crash. The journal would report, the observed object was large and had the shape of a circle. The saucer was orange, its edges were stained pink. The object flew from the side of the city and, performing a violent maneuver, as if it were to avoid being broken by land, fell almost vertically into the port waters." Soon after this was published, a second reporter, Zdeněk Balticky, would come out to gather more eyewitness accounts. He would find that most people agreed that it was about 5 a.m. January 21st a glowing spherical object flew over the city. Then, a while later, falling into the port basin while making a hissing and whistling sound. One man named T. Sobelsak would give this reporter a few more details. Sobelsak states that he saw a fireball bigger than the full moon appearing in the sky. It also seemed to have a sort of halo of light around it as it slowly moved over Gdynia. Balticky would write, "The flight ended with the object falling into the port basin at a distance of approximately 30 meters from the quay. Contact with the surface of the basin was accompanied by the phenomena of the objects glowing and the gurgling of boiling water." The editor of this article would then ask the question, was it a meteor, a bright fireball, or perhaps a remote-controlled rocket, or something else? One ufologist would comment that it would be a full week before the press would be allowed to publish these in any towns further away, such as Gdańsk and Warsaw. He said, they had to wait a week before the go-ahead from above, because the authorities were hiding the truth. However, others have come out claiming that it was shown on the front page of Evening Coast the very next day. Due to the controversy, journalist Kier Pomoski went out to the scene to interview witnesses once again. He stated all of them agreed that just after 6 in the morning something fell into the port pool with a loud bang, although no one knew exactly what the object was. Other similar articles would also be written around this time, with one coming from the Polish Department of Geological Sciences and another coming from the Museum of Earth at the Polish Academy for Science. This Academy of Science would also offer up a $1,000 Polish reward for finding the exact location of the crash. This was quite a large sum at the time, easily worth over $1 million US in today's money. Unfortunately though, it doesn't seem that anyone was ever able to provide this information and claim this hefty reward. However, other articles would state that the workers' description of the event was so detailed that they were able to indicate exactly where the object fell a full week later. 8 days later, on January 29th, maritime authorities would send 3 Polish Navy divers into the icy water. At first, their vision was obstructed by a thick cloud of mud, making research almost impossible. The divers would report a multi-meter layer of silt on the bottom with almost anything able to sink in and disappear. But later on in the day, it's said that they came back up to the surface with some sort of metallic fragment they had excavated from the bottom of the basin. One port worker, Aljozy Deta, would say in a later interview, it was a cylindrical container, like glass film, filled with rust liquid much heavier than water. Our lab was very afraid to check out this container. You know, after the war, the bottom of the sea was dotted with different filth. It was suspected that it could be a pyrite or phosgene. The problem was solved in a very simple way. An employee of the security office immediately appeared who took the find, and took so much we saw them. The Polish Navy would make a short examination before the pieces were brought into the High Polytechnic School's laboratory in Gdynia for analysis. They would state that the metal was of a stainless variety, although its origin was unknown. The researchers would speculate that this could be a piece of an iron-nickel meteorite, and this wouldn't be too unusual. It's said that of all the meteorites that fall intact, 3/4 of them land in water. The researchers would also note their similarities to a piece of magnesium collected from a UFO crash in Ubatuba, Brazil. They would also add that this doesn't necessarily mean that they were extraterrestrial in origin, and they could have been from some unknown type of rocket. Although it seems that the official reports of this analysis are lost, it is said that they had some sort of bad luck during research, and a good portion of this sample was lost. But it's also not known what did happen to the surviving piece of metal either. Shortly after this, one newspaper would publish an article stating that the metallic part had no trace of rust and implying that it might have initially been from a meteorite. According to one witness, only known as E. Vincent, on February 21st, 1959, exactly 1 month after the crash, another bizarre event would take place. Around midday, 2 Polish Coast Guards were patrolling the surrounding beaches when they would see a silhouette of a strange-looking male dragging itself up the beach. Completely exhausted, the silhouette would then collapse into the sand. Coming closer, the 2 Coast Guards would see that this male was very small in stature and was only a little more than 5 foot tall. It also appeared to be burned on a good portion of its body, with part of the face badly injured. This humanoid creature was said to also speak at some point, however it didn't seem to be in any known language. The being was then isolated and examined by doctors in an attempt to save its life. And on an interesting note, according to other reports, Vincent worked at this hospital and had access to the entity. They would first note that the creature was dressed in some sort of metallic one-piece suit. Undressing him was impossible, as the uniform didn't look to have any openings. The doctors would state that it definitely was not wool or any other kind of known fabric, and it seemed that this suit was made of some sort of very resistant metal. They said that they ended up needing metal shears to actually cut the uniform off, and even then it still took a lot of effort. Afterwards, they would comment that although the material appeared and felt very thin and light, it was as strong as steel and couldn't be ripped or torn. And once this suit was completely removed, the humanoid being was said to fall into a kind of lethargy, with its health never really improving. Here, the doctors would perform another examination, noting that the creature did indeed look human, but had several distinct differences. They would discover that it had yellow blood and a very different respiratory system when compared to ours. This entity was said to survive for a few days before dying shortly after the doctors removed a bracelet from its wrist. The doctors weren't sure if it was the bracelet or its poor health that was the cause, but they did feel like it could have been a combination of the two. After its death, they performed an autopsy, finding that it had a completely different system of internal organs, a spiral-shaped circulatory system, and many other anomalies. During this creature's stay, the whole hospital was apparently surrounded by security guards. Then right after the autopsy, the guards were said to take away the corpse with no one sure where they went to. Some claim that the Polish Special Services took them away to a secret laboratory. Others believe it's still hidden away in a cold storage unit in one of the nearby hospitals. Officials were contacted, being asked about this topic, but they would only remain silent. No eyewitnesses would come forward either, with many believing that they were quickly silenced by the security services. Vincent would say that this creature was put into a cooled vehicle with a good amount of security watching over it. He claims it was then escorted to an institute in Moscow where it was studied by Soviet specialists. The body was then frozen and stored and sealed away in an underground secret bunker where it remains to this day. But not all reports agree with E. Vincent's account of the story. Others claim that the first day the divers were sent out there, they found half of the object embedded in the mud in the bottom of the basin. It was then quickly hauled away before anyone else could find out about it. Another difference is that some also claim that not just one humanoid was found on the beach the next month, but actually 2 of them. It seems that these theories have been made popular by an officer at the Orlat School in Dublin. He claims that while working there, he had come across a secret document, describing the UFO crash in Gdynia while also mentioning a creature in a coma being stored in a type of incubator. The guard also claimed that while the first did die when the bracelet was removed, the second actually lived for quite some time. And then when its armband was finally taken off, it fell into a coma-like state. It was then sent to a secret laboratory somewhere in Poland. The scientists were intending on setting up a form of life support system meant to keep the humanoid being alive. And in this version of the story, the dead alien was said to have been taken to a bunker below the Center of Biomedical Services. This school officer would also comment that the bunker is said to hold bodies of other deceased extraterrestrial beings as well. Then in 1964, Dr. Józef Pokowinski from the Polish Academy of Sciences would write about this whole event in a section of his book titled Studia Geologica Polonica. Here he would discuss an interview with the first man said to report this incident, a docker named John Bloch. At the time, Bloch was on the Polish Ocean Line ship Jarosław Dąbrowski, which was moored in Port Basin No. 4. While on the deck, he would notice a red dot in the sky in the direction of the captain's bridge. It looked like this dot was flying right towards him at a frightening speed. It came so close that he flinched to his right side as a bright conical flash about 5 feet in diameter and 12 feet long erupted next to him. It was so bright that he was practically blinded, making him cover his eyes. It was then that he noticed a metallic sound, resembling the sound of sheet metal warping. Bloch was so concerned that he would go to the municipal police headquarters in Gdynia and file a report right after the event. Bloch then told a local journalist, "Something flew almost above my head. It was quite large, rather pink, with a branching fiery streak." Dr. Pokowinski would also write about his own diving expeditions. At some point in 1959, he would go to the location pointed out by witnesses, sending down a team of divers. They reportedly searched the bottom of the basin with hooks, but couldn't find any evidence of a rocket or meteorite. He worried that in the time it took him to get out there and search for it, the object may have just sank too far below the mud. The next year, in 1960, he put together a second diving team going back out to the basin for another search. This is when they would dredge the bottom of the basin floor while also bringing up mud to be sifted. Unfortunately, they again never did find any evidence of anything. The divers thought that there might have even been a mudslide since the previous year, further burying anything that may have been there. Concluding his research, Dr. Pokowinski wrote, "The light and sound phenomena observed by witnesses are quite typical for meteorite falls, and the red color that appeared after immersion in the water indicates that it was most likely siderite. Most likely because it's difficult to find any other explanation." It seems that after this, much of the story was forgotten until the late 80s, when it's rumored that an officer was searching the archives for materials for scientific work. Apparently this is when he would come across some very strange information, bringing this case back to life. From there, the story would spread not just through the country, but around the world as well. It's said that sometime in the 1990s, a sailor from the Dąbrowski would get a hold of the Japanese military, telling them that they had, quote, fished something out of the pool at that time. Then in 1996, a crew from the Japanese television NHK TTC Channel 8 came out to Gdynia to do their own story on this case, making a documentary. Next they would talk to an engineer, Aljosi Data, who actually made a comment previously. When talking to the crew, he would say that he saw a cylindrical foil vessel taken out of the water by security officers. They would next find a former port employee, Stanislaw Kolodziejski, who would say, "I was 30 at the time. Suddenly it was bright. Something burning fell into the pool. I ran to the ship, Jarosław Dąbrowski, and I turned to one man and questioned whether he had seen anything. He confirmed it. It was the size of a 200-liter barrel." After hearing from the eyewitnesses, the journalists working on this documentary would meticulously try to find evidence of the crash, metal fragments, or any traces of an alien in a local hospital. However, they never did find any clues. In 2006, two paranormal researchers, Milos Jasinski and Robert Lesnowski-Kwitz, would write about this topic in their book, Kryptonium Wonderland, Extraterrestrial Technologies in the Third Reich. The authors claim that during World War II, just north of Gdynia, at a secret military range, Germany tested new rockets as well as disc-shaped planes. They would also state that the same Gdynia port was also used to test U-boats as well as base them. The two would also write that they suspect there's still a secret institute in the area, believing that it has hidden chemical and nuclear weapons in it. Looking into these claims, others have come forward with their own research. Gdynia history researcher Sławomir Kotowski would say that during World War II, Gdynia was one of the largest German marine bases around, stating that they also performed many renovations at this port with large battleships and the only German aircraft carrier once stationed there. Kotowski would also comment that at this time no one in the city ever took UFO reports seriously. He would go on to explain that we now know there was actually an experimental center in Bobby Dolly and they were hiding real secrets there. After World War II, the Russians had control of the area and wouldn't let anyone from the Polish Navy in to investigate for several years. Researcher and author Jarosław Kaczynski would comment on this, saying, We don't know what they found, what they took home, or what wasn't discovered. There are many indications that they were working on state-of-the-art solutions and inventions there. He would continue stating that another reason he believes Bobby Dolly must be hiding secrets is because right after the war, a flood of Germans came out wanting to dig in the areas around the center. For what might have been studied there, Klodzinski would speculate they were probably doing research on torpedoes or acoustic mines. Assessing the whole situation, he would say, "I suppose that there are still many undiscovered military facilities hidden in the ground. We are talking about the area of the air base, and I think that the military does not know about all the facilities that are located there. Because, for example, some corridors are covered or bricked up." In 2013, on the anniversary of the object's crash in the port basin, Gdańsk television returned to the case, offering several hypotheses on the whole event. It seems that there were more UFO sightings in the area shortly after the crash. The TV crew would state that the other UFO was most likely searching for the downed aircraft, but the Soviets had already taken it for themselves. And after all of this, they would tell everyone to be quiet and classify the whole event. The other theory they would put forth involved a cover-up. They claimed that this could have been a downed American spy satellite that was then captured by Polish and USSR security services. Then to hide the whole event, the legend of the crashed UFO would be created. The TV crew would even speculate that the story was based on the world-famous Roswell crash, noting the similarities between the two incidents. Now a city council member and a member of the Gdynia Underground Explorer Club, Jaroslaw Kaczynski would talk about a few more details on this case. This researcher claims that his father had served at the naval port and knew of the event. He claims that something did indeed fall into that port basin, but it was immediately confiscated and taken by the Soviet army. And Klodzinski isn't quite sure that it was a meteorite. If it was a meteor of the size reported, then it would have caused a wave washing away half the district, but none of this happened. His father believed that this object was the German machine known as the Bell, saying they brought it to the port for testing after the Russians captured it at the end of World War II. Shortly after this TV program aired, some ufologists would look into the claim that it could have been a downed American spy satellite captured by the Soviet military. After all, the majority of people felt this would be the most likely answer. The ufologist even claimed that USSR created this story just to hide the fact that they had gotten a hold of this American spy technology. With this story, it would also not provide any countries with the pretext to come search the area. Two researchers, Dr. Anton Avlov and Adam Trozowinski, would come up with the conclusion that this must have been the remnants of an American spy satellite named SCORE. Standing for Signal Communication by Orbital Relay Equipment, this craft actually launched from Cape Canaveral on December 18, 1958, just 1 month prior to the event in Gdynia. They would also mention that according to documents they studied, SCORE was supposed to be destroyed on the 21st of January, the same day as the Gdynia event. This satellite was launched aboard an ICBM Atlas rocket and placed in a low Earth orbit where it was supposed to stay for around a month. Inside the satellite was state-of-the-art telecommunications equipment, which was developed at the Army Signal Research and Development Laboratory under the leadership of the Advanced Research Projects Agency. This communication device was then integrated into the warhead of the ICBM. Nowadays, this equipment is said to be the equivalent of 2 tape recorders with 4 antennas attached. Still, this was quite the step up from the beeping sound made by Sputnik 1 and 2, launched just the year prior. This equipment also allowed for two-way radio communication, being used as a radio signal repeater to be able to talk in real time. Actually, SCORE was almost going to hold a Christmas message from President Eisenhower, broadcast across the globe for the first time from space. However, he seemed to have forgotten to tell anyone this plan, and by the time he got around to it, the Secretary of the Army, Wilbur M. Brunker, had already recorded a message. In the end, SCORE was said to be successful, with the owners of powerful radios able to tune in and hear the first words from space from around the world. The official version of the story claims that after a few weeks, the satellite burned up in the atmosphere over the Atlantic near the island of St. Helena. However, another report claims that the re-entry was also seen over Guam, and the two researchers would come across information that contradicted both of these. In one report, they would read that the rocket deviated from its launch trajectory. It said that the US had actually sent the code for the satellite to self-destruct, assuming that the pieces would be disintegrated on re-entry. Instead, these two researchers think that it actually landed in the Gdynia port, with it immediately gaining the attention of Polish and Soviet intelligences who came to drag it out of the basin. In more recent years, some Polish ufologists have come out saying that the link between the crash on January 21st and the body on the 1st of February were too quickly established. They suggest that this was a baseless rumor, as nothing can truly connect the two events. They go on to state that the investigation seems to give the least precise information and only leads to a couple of possible theories. These ufologists would also claim that the story just seemed to appear in the newspapers out of nowhere and was reported on by researchers later on. Some skeptics believe this whole thing was just a rumor created to mislead Western readers. At the time, not many Russian or Soviet scientists believed in UFOs, attributing most sightings to ball lightning and other atmospheric phenomena. So they say that it's possible that these stories were only created to poke fun at UFO-believing Westerners. Some scientists have also come out saying that if something the size of the object in the story really did crash into the bay, it would have caused great destruction. They say that there would have been a large shock wave from the impact, and it would have caused damage to local buildings and sent shrapnel flying towards all the witnesses. Recently, one UFO investigator in Poland, Bronislaw S. Pecki, has stated that he knew E. Vincent and had also seen the creature for himself. He would say that Vincent was actually a member of the medical staff of the University Hospital in Gdynia for some time before moving away to England. Since this statement, some ufologists have tried to track down or contact Vincent, but unfortunately no one has been able to find him. With so many contradictions in this story, other researchers have even tried to get in touch with some of the original witnesses, but many couldn't be found, and others would later retract their statements. Some feel that they could have been intimidated or bribed not to say anything too, saying that the Soviets hushed everyone up, concealing the true nature of the event. Nowadays, most believers in the flying saucer theory are said to either be UFO researchers or paranormal enthusiasts. But if this story is true, then it's one of the only few incidents of alien contact that have taken place in Poland. But unfortunately, whatever really happened in Gdynia has never been proven or even clarified. It does seem in fact that without a doubt something fell from the sky that night and into the port basin, but after that the reports vary with details. Some continue to claim that it was a flying saucer that crashed into the port that night, while others say it was a US spy satellite that was quickly rushed off to the USSR by Russian secret services. Either way, this UFO crash has brought fame to the city of Gdynia, and although the official case remains unsolved, this event continues to live on as its own type of urban legend. Thanks for watching, everyone. Although it's a bit different than my normal icebergs, this is actually the beginning of Tier 3. I just wanted to make sure I could get in as much detail as I could and made it its own video. And if you enjoyed watching, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps my videos get seen by more people and helps my channel grow as a whole. Be sure to leave a comment too if you have any suggestions for future videos. This was Matt, and I want to believe.